I'm just going to read from the back from the teaser. In fact, I'm actually going to read it from the book itself. She was born into a perfect family, but by age 16, Jacqui Burnett wants to kill her father. Decades later, Jacqui believes she has left a turbulent past and the trauma of multiple near-death experiences behind her. On the surface, she has everything she's ever dreamed of: a solid education, success, and a wonderful husband. She was about to step into a board meeting, but instead she slid from her office chair and cowered under her desk, sobbing. As managing director, she was meant to announce a year of outstanding results, but instead she was paralyzed. In a desperate search for answers, Jacqui travels to America, and alone in the Rocky Mountains, her life starts unraveling, and the truth of her chaotic childhood begins to emerge. Amidst confused attempts to find love and meaning, Jacqui has to face death one more time, along with an avalanche of unexpected obstacles before rising from the ashes to heal. If that doesn't want to make you read the book, it's absolutely incredible. I was chatting to Jacqui earlier on and said, sometimes the most difficult thing to write is this 100 words. This is sometimes the most difficult thing that we want to do. Jacqui, I'm sure you've heard this before, because everyone I've spoken to seems to have done it exactly the same. But I sat down and I read the book in 2 sittings. I read part 1. I needed some counseling after that. And then the next day I read part 2. But as the song goes, the best place to start is at the very beginning. Maybe just give us some context for the story, and if you can take us possibly through the prologue.
Thank you, Andre. I'll read the prologue in a second, but the prologue is actually the middle of my life, or a good midlife crisis. And but it was the beginning of my truth, and I would say my authentic, unexpressed truth, a place that I needed to come to. So having gone through multiple traumas, particularly for those of you who have read the book and for those of you who haven't, at the time that this piece is written, I'm 46, I'm in the mountains in Colorado, and I'm sort of expressing the fact, and the honesty at that stage, I wasn't aware of the fact that my traumas had brought on the fact that I suffered from recurring PTSD. And what happens, and actually because my girlfriend Jill recommended I watch a show on Netflix the other day called The Maid, and watching her feeling immobilized with PTSD, I'm not going to cry, although I'm very tempted right now, made me realize of what it felt like for me in some of those moments. So it was a wonderful reminder of how hard it can be when you've gone through hardship. And what I also loved about that particular show was that they are bringing to the forefront a very important topic for me, which is emotional abuse. And not that other abuse doesn't matter, I think all abuse is relevant, but emotional abuse specifically. So, but at that stage, I'm pretty much paralyzed and confused about everything in my life. So the prologue. There are 1,000 ways that you can stare up at a snow-capped peak, but there's only one way that you can lie up there, dead in the ice. The mountains aren't here simply for our enjoyment. They are sublime, and I'm a dead woman walking through the snow, trying and failing to touch that otherworldly power. I'm standing 11,000 feet above the world and staring down at the wreckage of my life. I came into this life as a stranger, and now, after 8 near-death experiences and 15 years of marriage, I'm leaving as a stranger. My husband does not know me, and I do not want to know myself. I avert my eyes from what lies inside, the way one looks away from a mangled body at the scene of a car accident. I want to keep speeding down the highway and put it all out of my mind, but I can't do that anymore. It's screaming to be let in. It's hammering on the windows and smashing through the doors to be let in, to be let out. I'm frozen, and the wind tugs at my clothing. If I stayed here and did not move, at last, I would die. Now I know why I traveled over 15,000 kilometers to get to these mountains in Colorado. I'm running away from the person I have become. I've been trapped inside someone else's idea of myself. which bears no relation to the truth of who I am, and I ache for someone to tell me what to do. I ache for someone to explain to me how I became like this. The snow keeps falling, and I am alone.
I think one of the things that we decided to do tonight, and although many of you have read the book, was not to give away too much about the story. But for those of you who read that section, it's a crucial section. And for me, it probably was the best section in the book. I absolutely adored it, and it's just that point of realization. But it really, it epitomizes everything that was happened there. Jacqui, relationships are so important in your life, but there's one relationship that seems to have overridden all of them, and that's the one with your father. But it's quite tumultuous. I was just joking and said, you know, I was a bit scared to meet you at first, because there was some really scary scenes. But you know, we live in a world of social media and Facebook, so nowadays when you describe relationships, one of the ways that you can say it's complicated. And I think the relationship that you had with your father is complicated. Just set the scene for us a little bit and tell us a little bit about that relationship. And I know you've got a poem that you'd like to read for us as well.
Yeah, so you know, something in terms of the other work, my writing online and the work where I do the workshops that I'll be launching next year in South Africa, is that all of our relationships are our mirror. And the mirror is something that we're not very good at looking at, and realizing that our relationships, the things that we like about ourselves, we see in others. But likewise, the things we don't like about ourselves, we see in others. And the very difficult and hard part is for us to learn to love that part of ourselves, which is the very thing that we don't like inside somebody else. And that's a very hard part, because we would rather go with blame or a projection or a defense mechanism. So yes, my relationship with my father was very toxic and complicated, as you would say. But it was in learning to find love for my father that I found love for myself. And in learning to find love for myself that I could find compassion for my father, which I'll speak to a little bit in terms of what it means, you know, courage, real courage. So this is a poem for my father, and it's the start of the book. So my book is split into 3 parts. Part 1 is dedicated to my father, part 2 to my mother, and part 3 to myself. So this is for my father. My imperfections are my beauty spots along life's mirrored wall. I wear their scars externally, so you can see them all. My shame, my guilt, my blame, my doubt, my inner critic's plea, the freedom from their sight and sound, projection's gift to be. I know now that your mirror's truth reflects the perfect me. Uncomplicated for its grace, my heart gives thanks to thee.
Wow, quite hectic. One thing, and I'm off the script, and I told you I'm not going to stick to the script.
Be nice, Andre.
Through all of these things, you loved your father dearly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it starts off with this almost adoration of this perfect family. And it just struck me this morning. And this morning I went to this Musi Mayamani thing, and it's the 16 days of activism and stuff like that. So for me, this is just like the absolute perfect setting to just discuss this relationship, because it was so important to you and it took you so far. You've always had a very strong moral compass, and you touch on a lot of things that a lot of people obviously don't want to say out loud. There's a beautiful passage in chapter 5 where you've just had a heated argument with your father, and you touch on so many of the aspects which molded many of us as we grew up. Now, Jacqui and I are very similar in age. You would never say that, I'm only 35. But there were many things, and when she was talking about the music and the domestic servants and all those things from race and how we approach life or whatever, they're all so similar. Just share some of these conflicts about religion and found all those things that happen in your relationship with your family.
Well, this part of this book, this paragraph that you've asked me to read, really speaks to the nature of the work that I am so deeply passionate about. Is, you know, where do our beliefs come from? Where do your beliefs come from? And we don't spend enough time, you know, sort of talking about it, because we're so busy justifying our beliefs in the way that we are in the world. But our beliefs inform our thoughts. So everything we think is underlined and supported by the very thing that we believe. And that then is a result of how we behave in the world with our words and our deeds. So as a 12-year-old self, here I am, and I'm going to read this piece to you, and I'm experiencing and learning for the first time self-doubt, or that I'm aware of, or that I'm articulating here for you. And thereby learning judgment, not only for myself, but for others. But I'm talking through my own inner dialogue here as to how I'm now starting to create that story of self-judgment, and therefore, bringing on initial anxiety and insecurities. So as Andre said, I've just had a fight with my father, and I'm now sitting on my own trying to figure this out. It was true. I was hard to love. I imagined my father drawing up a pros and cons list of having me as his daughter. On the good side, I was tough. Pain was nothing to me. I was smart. Dad said that women weren't cut out for working with numbers, but I was excellent at maths and science. I wasn't a loose girl like some of the high school girls that Ellen and Mark hung around. They wore flirtatious and wore sexy bikinis, and Alan's friend Amy was a bra model, which my father said was disgusting. I would never shame my father that way. I prayed and I read the Bible and enjoyed it. I wasn't vain. In fact, I never bothered to look in the mirror. I racked my brain trying to think of more reasons for him to love me, but came up blank. The negatives crowded in. The first negative was the biggest, and the rest all stemmed from it. I was an outspoken girl, and there was nothing my father hated more than females with opinions. Women were made by God to only be involved with children, kitchen, and church, and nothing else. God, as he had told me many times, made man superior to woman, like white is superior to black. Girls should be married, barefoot and pregnant by 19, and that was that. I wasn't sure why we had to be barefoot. He thought I was too sensitive, even though I could count the number of times I cried in front of him on one hand. I was too inquisitive, and I didn't respect my parents enough. I was disobedient. He had told me that countless times, that I caused him constant worry because I was a girl.
We chatted about this evening. What struck me was issues of race, the position of women. We're talking 40 years ago, or 30, well, in her case, 10 years ago. We're talking about a long time ago. But one of the things that struck me is the insight you had as a 12-year-old. I mean, I was chatting to Glennis and my wife about it, and saying we sort of didn't even realize there was a part of it until we were like 19. It was just normal. And yet you had this deep moral compass. Is it just something that instinctively happens to you, or is it the experiences that you had? Where did that all come from?
Well, and this comes partly from my own experience, but a big part also, from the education and the fact that I'm deeply curious about the human condition, and I read about it all the time. So we know that we those of us that have children or have been around children at the age of 2 know that it's called the terrible twos, or the inquisitive twos. And we start to shut our children down as opposed to letting them find the answer for themselves. So there's a lot of why mommy, why, why. And for whatever reason, I don't know if sometimes it was because I was number 4 in the pack. My parents had 5 children in 6 years. My mother was probably too exhausted to deal with me, maybe. She also did say that I swam upstream. So, she bathed us all in a row, and Jacqui would be my first brother, my second brother, my third brother, and then Jacqui somewhere, and then my 4th brother. So I think I was just always an outspoken child. That was the nature of my spirit. And for whatever reason, I wasn't content with the answers I was getting. And when you often see a child throwing a tantrum because they're not content with the answer that they're getting, but the parent's exhausted or having a meltdown, or their belief system is such that that's the answer that they give. But sometimes, to actually stop and maybe ask the child why they want to know what they want to know and what's coming up for them. And a very good example is that I remember, when I was studying in San Francisco. So when a child stubs his toes, 2 years old, and bursts into tears, how often do we take that child and say, don't cry? versus take that child and say, you're safe. I'm here until you finish crying. And the crying stops very quickly. And so that's really what we've done. We're really shutting down the spirit of the child. And we don't know necessarily, there's not much written about it in the world at the moment, that we are actually mind, body, soul, and spirit. And that's the work that I do, is help people identify and see the separation between soul and spirit. And we're growing up, well, certainly you and I grew up in a time where the educated narrative was be good academically or be good on the sports field. And that's dealing with mind and body. But what work were we doing in terms of soul and spirit work? And certainly the places of, churches or synagogues or any form of religion, there was a lot of more community, whereas we think now on social media that's social, but where people really were present for each other, where your minister would, help marriages stay together or trauma. We don't really have those places other than maybe a therapist who we don't know, and it's not a part of our community necessarily. So as a result, we don't do a lot of soul and spirit work, and besides the fact that very few of us ever know the separation. And so we're shutting down the child at a very early age with the no narrative, and we're taking away from the fact, actually, baby, cry. Because we're all so busy driving this over performance, multitasking, and wanting to be the best at everything, as opposed to being our authentic selves and being vulnerable.
Huge wisdom, eh?
It's taken me many years of studying and a lot of heartache.
I must confess, is I never had that. I never had it in the spades that you had it, because it's one thing to actually sort of be curious and to say, well, this isn't right. It's another thing to confront and to come into conflict, and you did that. And there were occasions, at times I was like, shut up, sort of like, this is not the right thing to say to your father, because, but it's you, and it seems to have been, it's born into you.
Well, do you remember there's a part in my book where my grandmother, it's my 21st birthday, and I decided not to have a party, but she lived in an old age home at the time, and I went and had lunch with her, and we were chatting, and I was getting to a place where I was trying to figure certain things out, and she knew that I was struggling. And this is actually my father's mother, my father's mother. Anyway, and she looked at me at one stage, because I was talking about this continual conflict that I had with my father. And she just said to me, Jacqueline, on the day that you were born, God was determined to piss your father off, and he did a fine job. But I think maybe that I was the mirror of him in terms of the child that might have been shut down by his parental narrative. I mean, we struggled to understand, because my grandparents were very liberal, my father was very conservative. But what made that shift for him? So me growing up in a very conservative environment, and yet you would consider me very liberal relative to him, maybe that's the very reason, is sometimes that we push up against the very thing that doesn't make sense for us.
I love that bravery about your soul. Now, I think you might be quite challenging to live with. Talking about challenging,
what do you think?
My mother said to me, what is this book? I read a lot of non-fiction, so I'm normally reading something quite complicated, and so Life's Not Yoga obviously stood out quite a lot. So my mother said, what is this? I said, no, I'll be the discussant, we're going to talk about this book. And then she kept saying, so what's it like? And I was like, God, this woman nearly died again. Sort of like, and every sort of 20 pages, I was like, oh my God, oh my goodness, So I, for one, am amazed that you're alive. Sort of, I think it's quite incredible that you're alive. And so I finished the section where we've gone through everything, and now she's in the mountain. I'm thinking, oh goodness, she's made it now. She's got all these degrees. She's a big shot. She's wandering through the mountains, pondering her life and stuff. And then you flip and get lost in the snow with no cell phone reception, and it's getting dark, and all this stuff is happening. But it was the critical point in the entire book for me.
Yeah.
So that getting lost, again, nearly dying, it's a point in the book. Just talk us through that and what that moment meant to you.
It was the 9th time that I was facing a near-death experience, or a significant trauma experience. And I do believe, maybe it's because I didn't think I had more than 9 in me. This is Sophie Blue Press in terms of, you see the cat in the back here. I thought maybe I had 9 lives, and I've experienced.
And this was number 9.
I had 10 and 11, which is another conversation just this year. So I'm keeping it at 11. I've decided enough. But yes, I am lucky to be alive. But I think that's the thing is that we're all lucky to be alive. And many of us just don't own our story. We're so busy hiding behind the shadow of our shame, guilt, and blame. And as a result, it's driving anxiety, it's driving fear, it's driving judgment, it's driving depression, and a whole lot of other not only mental illnesses, but physical illnesses as well. And I have to tell you that this man was told that he was not going to be here. How long ago?
February.
February. How many weeks were you given?
Between 12 weeks and a year.
Yeah, there we go. They said you won't be, and he's now cancer-free. And really what it is, and that's, goes to the root of my work, is here I am after 8 near-death experiences, and I'm unable to figure out where I am in life. I had thought I had it all figured out just before that, but I had gone through another trauma experience, which was with a nasty litigation with Toit, that had brought on a whole lot of stories for me, and it triggered a lot of my father issues in terms of right and wrong, or what I perceived as right and wrong. And my life is about to fall apart as well. I am the avalanche in my own life. But anyway, I am 45, the piece that I'm going to read for you now. It's the start of part 2. I'm depressed. I'm actually immobilized with confusion and fear, and mostly as a result of the fact that I am in what I would call a dissociated PTSD state. The snow melts as it touches my skin, and I wish it would pile up and cover me, a white hand covering my mouth and nose so I don't feel angry anymore. I'm hiking alone in the Rocky Mountains in Colorado. I hike for answers, but the mountains look on impassively. Granny would say I must work it out for myself. What else would she say to me if she was beside me, hiking beside me? She would be hard and straight with me as she always was. 20 years have passed since that day my father hit me. My marriage to Greg didn't last long. Even so, I've been happy, gloriously so at times. But now I'm totally lost. But now I'm totally lost, and to be honest, somewhat terrified. You'd think I had it all figured out by now, but I feel like a bat flying around the kitchen while someone swats me with a dishcloth. From the outside, things look simply marvelous. I'd always thought adults had it all figured out, but the older I get, the more I realize that no one really has a clue what's going on. Sure, my mom's business went insolvent, and Oma lost her house, and my dad is as crazy as ever. But apartheid had fallen, and I had done well. I'd completed my undergrad degree, gone on to get an MBA, and had had a ball studying in the Netherlands for a semester. I'd fallen in love with my country again, made money, and had a great career. I'd built a business from an insolvent mess to something worth millions. I'd created jobs, salvaged failing businesses, made friends, traveled to corners of the world, and learned more than I could have ever foreseen. I'd fallen in love with people, places, work, and life. And I believed that in my own small way, I had made a difference in the world where I could. I'd helped people access better education and work opportunities, and I'd even adopted and fostered abandoned animals. I cut ties with my father and made an effort to get closer to my mother, when my father allowed it, that is. I'd learned that Dad had kept many secrets from Mom, and noted that Mom forgot distressing events as her way of managing life. She'd even erased whole parts of my life from her memory. I'd observed how painful this was for me. Although I missed my family, the status quo was best for all of us. Best of all, I'd met the perfect man, fallen in love, gotten married again, and moved into a gorgeous house in one of the world's most beautiful cities, Cape Town, by the way. Michael was everything I could have wanted, and still, everything fell apart.
Everyone thinks that you're 45, you should know everything by now. No, that feels, it's like 45, I gave up my career and decided to become a professional speaker from being an actuary. So we sometimes do these things, and yet they are meant to be. they are meant to be. And I think this is such an amazing turning point. I've decided to write a book about my experience because it was quite weird and fairly miraculous. But something I find terribly hard is the title. So I've been through about 12 versions of the title, and I think you went through something as well. Talk to us a little bit about Life's Not Yoga. What are we actually getting at there?
Well, before I actually talk about it, I just want to say that you mentioned how hard this was to write at the back. Well, Nina, my development editor, how many drafts did we go through? Yeah, hundreds. Okay. And the title was originally called I Dared to Ask, because I'm daring to ask for love in the world. I'm daring to find evidence that God is love. And I think in the beginning, I mean, nobody really loved the title, and I was like, that's it, that's the title, it's not going to be anything else. And then 2 years before I actually, put the book out there, I don't even know what it was, it just came to me that the title needed to change, and I couldn't figure out what that title should be. And I think we had 150 or 120, let's maybe not exaggerate, 110, but we're definitely over 100, Nina.
I'm not doing too badly.
Yeah, you're doing okay. And it took us quite a long time, and we worked through things. And so in the end, the piece that I'm going to read to you is where the title came from. We suddenly read this piece and we said, that's the title. And I knew it was going to be a challenging title in terms of how it landed with people, but it's created the most amazing conversations, including this one, which from a marketing point of view, because she's also a damn good marketer, that one, we realized that there was some benefit in the conversation as to why this title. But at the heart of it, Aurobindo said, all life is yoga. And my title is a bit of a play on that, in terms of what does it mean. And we've all had unfortunate things happen to us, or we've done something that we're not proud of. And how does that impact us in terms of shame, guilt, and blame? What does that bring up for us in terms of our common emotions of anxiety or depression, self-loathing, blame on somebody else, hating somebody else? So yeah, the title is very much a play on what does it mean and how do we respond to life. So here I am. Now everything has fallen apart, and I mean in monumental proportions. I am down to a suitcase, and I ask, now what? Now what? All I can do is stick to my plan, move to Toronto and try my damned hardest to improve my writing so that maybe, someday, someone will get some good out of all of this. I need to let go of my fears and settle in the pain and let it be, the way I do with yoga. I tell myself, this is just yoga, Jacqui. This is an uncomfortable pose. Find comfort in the discomfort. But life's not just yoga. I've lost Michael. I've lost Dan. I've lost everything. I keep telling myself, find comfort in the discomfort. Try to stay present in the moment of pain and accept it. Oh, fuck off trying to be so zen. It'll never get you anywhere. But it does. It gets me all the way to Toronto, even though as I pack my entire life into a small suitcase and board the plane, I feel like I'm stepping off a skyscraper into thin air, my heart riddled with holes.
I didn't understand that when I read the book, and it was when we had breakfast that this came out to me, the whole, you just put it so into place. And I think it's maybe because I have a mental block about yoga. Because I just stopped bending about 10 or 15 years ago. And the uncomfortableness. But two things that you said, and one of the things that I've changed a lot in the last year, some of my friends here will tell you, is that sometimes there's great comfort in the discomfort. And sometimes pain is one of those things you've actually got to experience. So I remember when I was in the hospital and they were hacking bits out of me all over the place. It was like a really great diet plan, because they just take chunks out of you from all over. But one of the things that I realized, that these doctors were just as stressed as I was. I had a trainee anaesthetist, and I'll never forget, he was stabbing me feverishly trying to get some drips into my arm, and my veins are very deep down, so you couldn't really find them. And I realized that he was stressing, and so the more he stressed, the more he was going to mess me up. So I just pretended like I was like Superman. It's like, you're doing well, bud. And actually, the more I concentrated on the pain, the less it became. So he was digging a needle in my body. And then the other thing is that I was also contemplating why, because everything seems to happen for a reason, is why am I with you? So you've actually just said my title, which is Just Breathe.
Yeah. There we go.
Our families and our backgrounds in this country often determine how we're raised, and your family is no exception. I love the way the contradictions have been expressed. Tell us a little bit more about how your upbringing has played out in your life.
Well, as I spoke earlier, our beliefs inform our every way of being, and I had to at some stage stop and acknowledge where was I becoming like my father. And certainly, as I was, after my husband had a nervous breakdown 7 years into our marriage, and I was at a stage where I was talking there, where I've decided to leave the marriage because I feel he's not stepping up, and I'm becoming angry all the time, and I'm taking my rage out on him, and I don't like me. So it's me that I'm looking at. And always, when we talk now, I never left him, I left myself. And so I left the marriage because I didn't like who I had become. And one of the things, and I'd love to tell a story of one of the biggest challenges I had in terms of looking at a belief that I had. So, not only in terms of my parental or societal narrative that informed me, but we all struggle, or most people struggle, with commuter taxis in South Africa. So I'd like to use that one as an example. And I decided that because my work is very much about bringing about change and manifesting the miracles, I thought, well, how do I manifest a changed attitude towards these taxis? So the first thing that happened is I noticed a taxi come along and thought, well, what do you actually believe, Jacqui? What is it that you believe about these drivers? Well, I believed none of them had a license. I believed that if they did, they bought it illegally. And so the story went on, and I ran through the kind of conversations that happen always on Saturday nights at a dinner table about damn commuter taxis, and can you believe? And I thought, okay, well, if I want to change the story, I've got to first look at the belief, and what if I let go of the belief? These people drive at that stage, people that I employ to work, my lady who comes to, clean in my house, my beautiful earth child uses them regularly, I can't say I do. And what if it's important to me that they all get there safely? What if these are just people trying to make an honest day's wage? So I took the belief and I thought, okay, well, I want to manifest, because we've all heard about books like The Secret, or how you can manifest the miracle. And I wanted to bring about this change. I wanted to manifest this miracle. Anyway, so I first looked at it and I said, okay, well, they're all beautiful people. They're all fantastic people. They've all got great licenses. Now, we've heard about change your thoughts, change your thoughts, change your thoughts. Well, it often doesn't work if you don't follow through, because you can't just change the thought. I had to start looking at my behaviors and how I spoke when I was at a dinner table, or when I heard other people talk about it. Do I engage? Do I defend? And defending is also what we call false humility. It's on the other side of, people who like to brag versus they silently tell everybody that they're such a good person or what they're doing. So I looked at it and I thought, okay, what's really going on here? And then I noticed that every time I saw taxis, I thought, so for me, love is the space. So God is the space between you and me. So what I'm going to do, every time I'm going to see a taxi, I'm going to say they're good people, and I'm going to make sure that there's lots of space on the road for them. So every time I saw one, I'd stop and I'd wave them on. And I'd wave them on. And it takes about 2 years, and I think, man, you are so full of yourself. You are so full of vanity. And this is now the ego playing out, false humility. I'm a good person, look at what I'm doing. And I said, no, look at the belief system that's lying there now, and look at the thoughts that are coming out. And I had to unpack it again and let go of it again. And I thought, what if you just let it be? And eventually it became, and I confess that this miracle took about 7 years, it became about, whenever I saw a taxi, there was no more story running. It was just about giving space, accepting what was happening. If there was a bit of an uncomfortable moment, it's fine, don't bring it into my car, and just let it go on. And then one day, I realized I didn't see taxis anymore. I don't see them. I've manifested them out of my reality. I've manifested a miracle. And I was like, this is so cool. This is so cool. I was like, wow, how can I live in South Africa and never see a taxi? Anyway, and then I got to sit with this one for a while. And it was about a year later, one day, I'm driving along. Man, I laugh at myself. I'm driving along, and the next minute this taxi stops, and the guy waves, makes stops, and he moves on from me, and I think, what a nice guy. And I wave at him like this, and I think, check this out. Anyway, I drive on again, and there's another taxi, and he waves me on, and the one opens the window, And they're just taxis everywhere. And I'm going, look at these. And I'm going, oh my goodness. I don't see them anymore. They don't exist in my life. But the miracle came in accepting the love that I put out, I got back. And that's, you know, we've just spoken, you don't sometimes understand how you manifested this cancer out of you. Well, I've manifested, you know, 2 illnesses, physical illnesses. One being a cyst on my ovaries that they wanted to operate on. But it is about shifting. But you've got to go to so many layers, and that's why I'm excited about my workshops and my online writing, is where I help people go through those stories. Because I believe we've all created the miracle somewhere in our life. How do we take it and replicate it in other places in our life? So, you know, that's really the heart of it. The bottom line is, we often lack the courage to really question our belief and question whether our belief is actually embedded in complete love, which means full acceptance for you and me and all that is.
That is just so much wisdom packed in a couple of sentences. When I was 40, I was so clever, let me tell you what. I was running a big insurance company overseas, and I was like a genius. I mean, I really was. And then I turned 50, and my wife had a birthday party for me, and I thought, I'm going to give a speech, and I'm going to do one of those Oprah things. I'm going to say, this is what I know for certain. And suddenly I couldn't think of anything. I was like, how can I have lived to be 50 years of age, and I know absolutely sweet bugger all? And I could only think of 2 things, and I'll just share the second one with you. The second one is, my words become my reality. And I was like, and I think in many religions there's versions of this. And a lot of what you're saying there is this. This morning I caught an Uber to the Hotel Sky, and I got into the Uber, and the guy was surly, he didn't really want to speak to me, and I said, how's business? He said, it's shit. And I was like, what happened? He said, oh, it's quiet, and it's COVID, and everyone's on holiday, and the children are not at school. And he was surly, and he was really miserable. And then when I went home, I got another lift with a guy, and I said, how's business? He said, it's amazing. He says, I've been so busy all day. And he says, it's like one of my best days in a long time. And I thought to myself, very often is we manifest ourselves literally by the words. Has anybody looked at their stickers, by the way? Have you wondered what it's all about? Dare to be love.
Yeah.
Something that a lot of people, I don't even know how many of these people do know all about it, but tell us a little bit about Dare to Love, because she's like quite famous actually. So.
Yeah. So Dare to Be Love is really my online writing, which is the conclusion of my book in terms of how do we manifest and be love in the world. So where we can actually put our ego aside and bring about and manifest differences, like for example, like I did with the example of the taxi. And it's bigger than being kind, because being kind is sometimes very much attached to the ego in terms of how it fulfills us. And you know, Be Love is really about the essence of how we are in the world, where you are just completely at peace with what is going on and complete acceptance. And I'm going to tell again through a little story. So you see these Life's Not Yoga t-shirts. We wanted them for the event. And there was a situation where Steve and I had been away, and I came back and there wasn't much time, and I needed the t-shirts, and the company could literally deliver them today. And we wanted the store staff to be wearing them, you know, to help with sales. And so Steve and I are driving up to a wedding in Prince Albert, and I had the day before, because we were only back in Cape Town for a day, and I managed to find a woman who moved heaven and earth to be able to get these t-shirts to me for that day. And we were on the phone between the design, and on we went, and eventually that night I was on the phone, and in the car I was on the phone to her. And then my friend Rick had told me about someone as well who could possibly do the t-shirts. And the problem was, I didn't want the t-shirts on the day. We needed you know, for 2 weeks to the run-up. And this gentleman said that he could have them to me at least a week before, and which is what we needed. So I'm sitting there, and we're sitting in Worcester in the little coffee shop, and I said, I've got to phone this woman, and I need to cancel this order with her, but she did so much yesterday. I feel I need to offer her something as a sign of gratitude for the time and effort that she put into running around. But there was no return on investment. There's no economical sense in having the t-shirts only for today, because the store staff, thanks guys, have been wearing them. Anyway, so I sort of pluck up the courage, and I go around, and I do what I call an introspection and a little prayer asking for love to present, because I don't want to phone her. And then having compassion for myself, because I want to give this other gentleman the business because he can do it so quickly. But he was priceless, so he was cheaper, sorry. So there was a price difference, and it was also, I was sort of thinking about that. Anyway, so I phoned Tamsin. So if ever you need any branded gear, Tamsin's girls go to these fabulous little journals that you have here today. And I phoned her and I said to her, Tamsin, this is hard for me. And so what I was in the instance, I asked for the miracle to be manifest, and I let her know of my hesitation and fear. And I said, this is hard for me. Usually Jacqui would have, old business Jacqui would have just dealt with the issue. Anyway, and I said, this is hard for me, but I've got this situation, and I actually want to give this business to this chap. And I could feel in the phone, I could hear her annoyance, and she said to me, but I've already, I paid the deposit for the T-shirts, I'm not going to get my money back. And I then said, can you listen to me for a minute? And I told her the situation of that I need at the time, and that we needed the T-shirts earlier for the store staff to wear, etc., etc. And she let out a breath and she said, you know what, it's okay. I know I can sell those T-shirts. I would like to help you. Now, just that moment where she went within and found the courage to bring compassion, because I found the courage to be vulnerable. And it's in the storytelling that we find that space. And so I said to her, but I've got money to play with. Why don't we make the guests a lovely gift tonight? And so we'll be doing more business together. So yeah, and both of these people have just been such gifts in my life. And I know I'm going to have a continuing relationship with both of them. So
and don't you think the journals are stunning?
Yeah, aren't they divine? Yeah. So
use it for something
it's
nice.
not only witnessing and where you can bring it forth, but sometimes I had to be love for myself and my own anxiety and what I wanted to accomplish. But her just being love in that moment of full acceptance of my story, and her just saying it's okay. And what an amazing.
It's obviously something.
And then when her husband, I must tell you, when her husband dropped off the journals yesterday, he's twice your size. This big guy comes carrying these boxes. I can't find him or whatever, and he's like behind the boxes, and he puts them down, and he's like 6 foot. And I said to him, "You have the most amazing wife." And his face lit up, and he said, "You have no idea." And I was just like, but it was true, and just his celebration of this woman in his life, this beautiful human being that I had the privilege of doing business with. So,
What you haven't said, and you're quite humble about it, I own Good News South Africa on social media. And I've got 21,000 followers. There's 21,000 people that South Africa reckon is quite cool. You've got 43,000 followers. You're doing something right. Is it going somewhere? What are we doing with it? Is anybody else on it? Is anybody on the platform? Dare to be Life? 43,000 people on it, guys. You've got to move and get onto it. Where's it going to? What's the plan with it?
So, I mean, I think the reason why people have resonated with the platform is that it's the universal story. For anyone who's read the book, they found themselves somewhere. I don't think there's anyone here. Wilm is a good one who's read the book 3 times and taught me things in the process. These 2 young ladies over here, Charmaine, who I was fortunate to meet actually a year ago, but only really got to meet yesterday properly. So it's a universal story, and the Be Love platform is really about helping people overcome. I've suffered significant trauma. They see themselves in the book in terms of the common emotions. We all share the same emotions. We might have different ways of getting to our pain and suffering, but it's in dealing with the common emotion, and people wanting to unite to bring change for themselves. Because as Gandhi said, or was it Gilman said, to bring about change, we need to be the change within inside ourselves. So it's to find that courage, and I think that's why it's resonating. Is the work outside of the book.
No, so go have a look at where do we find it?
Well, it's all data. I know it's Jacqui Burnett now. Jacqui Burnett author. So all my social media platforms are Jacqui Burnett author.
So go look for it and see if you can sign on. I think it's really quite interesting.
Thank you.
Again, I've got to talk about myself a bit more. Obviously, having stared death in the eye and sort of come close to immortality, one of the things that I've very cockily said all my life, I've had such an amazing life, married to a beautiful woman, successful career, if I die, it will be okay. I've traveled the world, I've done everything. And then when they told me I haven't got any time left, it's like, whoops. It's like me dropping you in the ocean and stuff, and no matter how comfortable you are with dying, you suddenly start paddling like a bloomin' duck and you will paddle for hours and hours, if not days, to not die. Now, you've been through 9, 10, 11 of these experiences, and on the day that I saw you, you just nearly had one of those, or just had one of those. What do you think we're being taught?
Well, I think, certainly for me, because you asked what were the key things that I've learned from all of these experiences. I really prided myself on being brave, and that was something that was almost very important to me, how tough I was. I grew up with 4 brothers, and I could, pin them all down before they could even sort of think, and that mattered to me, to be so strong and to be so brave. But what I realized is, bravery is the root of the warrior, where you have to be brave and you have to actually deny fear. And in denying fear, there's no space for compassion. So if any of you have been into the military, you knew that if you were faced up against your opposition, you needed to put fear aside and be brave. Whereas courage is what matters. Courage is we have to acknowledge fear. We have to have compassion for fear. And we have to stare at our fear so that we can be compassionate. And when working from courage, so sure, recently Steve and I had a nasty car accident. In that moment, I saw myself literally disassociate and go into that space where I operate, I function. People have always said that if they go to war, they'd like me on the battlefield. Well, I would agree, but it's not healthy in day-to-day living where we're screaming at taxi drivers and carrying on and continually bringing war into our life and into our days. So what I've learned is to access courage and live with more compassion.
And so in one of those near-death experiences, you actually won an award for bravery, which you didn't realize at that stage. Is there a difference between courage and bravery? Is it the same thing?
No, that's what I'm saying. Bravery is denying fear and acting despite, whereas courage is compassion for fear.
Okay.
And so for me to not scream at a driver who, not that I ever really had those issues with road rage or being angry, but I'll never forget, I was in Toronto, and I gone on a dating site because the guys at the B&B decided I needed to go on the dating site. Anyway, I went for a date with a guy. And one morning we'd gone for an early morning hike, and we came back, and he was driving back, and the city was, we were driving, and the city was quiet. And the next moment, we were on this quiet road, and this car sort of turned and took off like this, and he nearly crashed into, well, he didn't really crash into the car, because, they don't go over the speed zone there. And he screamed at this guy, and the anger and fury in the car was just like, why? And I remember in that moment thinking, what if that guy just found out that his mother died, or his wife's just gone into labor? There's a whole lot of reasons, but it's irrelevant, because even if he was, because, like some people say, but what if he was just an idiot or whatever? But so what? Why bring that anger into the car? It's not necessary. And I just remember thinking, I can't have this in my life. But it was in understanding that true courage comes from having compassion for whatever the story is irrelevant. To justify our beliefs on but the guy's not looking where he's going, or but the guy's an idiot, or a whole lot of other cuss words that could be used, is not good enough. It's not good enough as far as I'm concerned. Step back and actually access courage, and there we find that's where we find compassion, is when we acknowledge the fear. So yes, he was triggered. Yes, it was scary, but actually, if I look at it relative to other things I've been through, we were kilometers away from an accident as far as I was concerned. And I remember thinking, I've got to break up with this dude, and I did. We didn't have another date. I just couldn't.
I think you guys are quite blessed to spend tonight with Jacqui, because this is the official South African launch. But a lot of people don't realize the book has been launched overseas already, so it's been selling, and I've got lots of details here. Do you want to share with us what's happening overseas? Is the book being received well? What are the reviews like?
Well, I'm very excited to say that I've had phenomenal reviews, and I'm carrying a very good rating on Goodreads, which I'm very excited about. I've probably got more international reviews than I've got local reviews. The South African market it's hard, it's hard to be a self-published author and put yourself out there. When you can put the book online, and we have social media platforms, and online is all ebook platforms, etc. But so far, I'm overwhelmed by the fact that, my Goodreads reviews are all authentic. My rating is phenomenal. I've had great ratings. I need more. I need to get it up, every month, because people read what people like.
Yeah.
So with a good rating, it encourages people. And as Alan and them have told me, that, you know, people come into the store and they look at the book and then they immediately open up the app and they look at Goodreads and they look at the reviews and the rating. So I'm very pleased to say that it's going well. But it's in the connection really with individuals that I find it, and that's what's so special for me. Some people that have pitched up here today. And I know, I don't know what the time is, but I want to share one more story quickly. A year ago, I was walking down the road. Steve had popped into to Woolworths, and I went to go get us a coffee at Bootleggers. And I was walking along the street, and I saw a woman who looked dejected and tired, and life had been hard, and she was sitting on her bags. And I assumed that this is probably where she might be living, but it was not comfortable, the whole experience. And I looked at her and I said, "Can I give you something?" And she looked at me and she said, "No." You know, she wasn't asking for anything, but it was very clear to me that things were not good. Anyway, I went into Bootleggers and I got us a coffee, and I think I bought her a water and a sandwich, and I gave it to her, and she was kind and she thanked me. And I actually, she sat in my heart, but as most people do, maybe because, you know, sometimes I know I tell you that, you know, I need to sell books to keep myself off the street these days. And a year later, I didn't realize at the time, I met the same woman, which was a few weeks ago. It was actually just before I came to meet with you. I was meeting with someone else beforehand. And this woman was handing out pamphlets. And I remember this woman, I remember thinking, you know, what would it take if this book isn't a success, that this is where I'm going to be one day. And I often don't take pamphlets because I don't want to waste the person's money if I know I don't need it. But I was watching her take the rejection of people not wanting the pamphlet. Her shoulders were up, and she turned around, and I looked at her and I thought, I'm going to take a pamphlet just to make her feel good, you know. And I called her over, and it was for a car. My car has just been fixed, so I knew I didn't need it, but I said, could I please have a pamphlet? And she looked at me, and it was the same woman, and she smiled at me. And there was this moment of connection, and we probably both forgot that we'd met a year before until that moment. And she looked at me and she said to me, "You're beautiful." And I was just thinking how beautiful she was, and I said, "But so are you." Anyway, she sat with me and I had my meeting with you. You know, that day was very rushed. Everything was anyway. So I'd finished the meeting with you, and I had a copy of the book next to me on the seat of my car. And I went home and I drove around the corner, and as I drove around, there was a bus shelter, and I saw her sitting there. And I reversed and I said, you know, "Hi, do you remember me?" And she said, "Yes, she remembered me from earlier." And I said, "What is your name?" And she said her name's Charmaine. And I signed the book, "Dear Charmaine," and I gave it to her. And yesterday we were having coffee at a coffee shop in Sea Point, and she walked past. And I shouted, "Hi, Charmaine." And she looked at me like this. And it was just amazing, you know, this woman who's gone through so much, with so much beauty. And we just connected, and I don't think she knew exactly who was saying hi to her at that moment. Am I correct? Yeah. She walked back 10 minutes later, and we stood chatting for a while. She said, "I've read your book, and I loved it, and thank you so much. It's inspired her." And this morning, when I went for my morning walk, I bumped into Charmaine, and I asked her to be here tonight. And just connecting with people who have also gone through a hard time, that's what's so beautiful for me. And that's why I'm so excited the work I'm going to be doing next year with the, with the Avela Foundation, which is You Matter, which deals particularly with people who have gone through significant trauma situations of burn, underprivileged people, burn victims. And I'm going to be doing that in tandem with the Royal Portfolio. My first workshop is going to be at the Silo. So, yeah, it's about compassion. It's the courage to connect with someone. But what happened in that day is we met each other, and we met as souls, and it was beautiful. And I thank you for gifting yourself to me.
Isn't that a wonderful story, eh? And Charmaine, I was chatting to you a little bit earlier on. I teach professionals to speak, and one of the things, the most difficult thing for them to do is to become vulnerable. And for me, and I always have a sentence, and every time somebody cries, I go, vulnerability is your greatest strength. And for me, I think you bring this out in the stories the whole time, which is fantastic. I can feel the wine's getting warm.
Yes.
So I'm going to race through a couple of quick questions. Is there an audiobook?
Yes, and it's running late because we've got a fabulous actress in Chicago, and she's had COVID and bronchitis, so we're hoping for it to be launched now in February. In February it should come out.
Fantastic. Is there any more books in the pipeline?
Well, yes, there's more books in the pipeline, but I first need to get this one to pay the rent, so that's really where I'm at this stage. And I've got some workshops that are launching next year, which I'm very excited about, and that is about, you know, helping people own their story, and, you know, it's where you'll see over there, own your story in order to heal, and really let's talk about shame, guilt and blame, as well as podcasts. There's young Shannon over there who's going to this, Razan, not Shannon's not here, but Razan's going to be doing all of that and helping me get all of those platforms up and running with IGTV podcasts, where we're going to help people.
And I presume you've got everyone's email addresses now, so you let us know when that happens.
Anyone in this room. But you can also go to my website and sign on there, and we'll keep you posted in terms of that content coming out.
Congratulations. I really enjoyed the book. I thought it was amazing. I think you've been amazing tonight. I think you're a natural storyteller. Is there anything you'd like to say to the people, or any sort of comments? I presume you've got lots of thank yous that you'd like to say.
I do have a few thank yous that I want to do. As I say, besides all of you that pitched up tonight, you know, with you guys on the back there, hey, you made it, thank you. So awesome. But, you know, first of all, to Habits, who have dressed me tonight in this beautiful dress. We have a working relationship and a great friendship, so thank you to Mandy. Also, my new book cover, my ebook, and so it's Greg and David and Publista Ellie Searle, in terms of helping getting the new cover out, which has been very exciting, and, you know, what I call more the formal launch of this book. Thanks, Ingo. Claremont Wines, and Steve decided that he was gifting the wine to me tonight as well, so thank you for that. But he negotiated a good deal from Claremont Wines, so thank you to Claremont Wines for being so generous with your pricing. And then Alan and Jacques at the back there, and Exclusive Books, and your team, thank you very much for hosting this event, and, you know, putting yourself out there for me despite COVID and some of the resistance originally from the South African market. The book review is out there. I know that some of them wanted to come tonight, but to the book reviewers in South Africa and internationally, you know, it's absolutely nerve-wracking sending your book to a book reviewer and having no idea what you're going to get. So the fact that I'm carrying a good rating, and I've had over 100 reviews, so that's very exciting for me, as well as the readers from Celia to Charmaine to Mandy to Rick to Jill and Rebecca, everyone here that's read the book, and other people that will still read the book. You know, without the readers, none of this makes sense. And as I say, the audience here tonight. And then a very special thanks to my two friends, Amanda and Jill. So Amanda is in America, who deals with me every day and who slaps me right when I'm not getting it right. And Steve has that job too now. And my girlfriend Jill, who has helped and understand it for being such an amazing friend, and Amanda. And then lastly to Steve, you know, we go through this is going to make me emotional, but we go through all of this. And I always say that at every moment of my life, when I get to meet someone like you, it makes sense to me why I had to go through what I had to go through to meet you, Charmaine. You're one of the sweetest, kindest people I've ever met, one of the strongest people I've ever met, and you've watched how hard this has been for me, and you've only encouraged me despite your fears for me. Both of that matters to me. Thank you for your kindness, your generosity, and for being who you are. You are loved and respected by me. Thank you for standing up for me. I appreciate it.
I'm not crying, I've got allergies.